episode of Smart Topics, Dumb Comics. I'm here with Nadiya. You explained to me that you are actually a Pittsburgh comic, but you spend a lot of time in Chicago. But regardless, you're here to talk to us about romantic comedies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you just told me that you did an entire dissertation on romantic comedies.
I did. When I was in university, I did a dual degree. And the farther you get in, I think the more professors are just bullshitting. They're like, you pick whatever you want, and if I like it, that's fine. And so on one of those like very free form, they were like, I want you to take a whole year, but suit your own fancy. I was like, romantic comedies. I'm about to know so much about Meg Ryan, and I know a lot about Meg. I know an embarrassing amount about Meg Ryan.
They're like, whatever, as long as UPenn gets $50,000 a year, we'll let you study wherever the
Yeah,
fuck
they'll
you
let you go into debt, and it doesn't have to be a good reason. I mean, there are philosophy majors and poetry majors. There's no litmus test for like real degree.
I guess you could write a paper on Bridget Jones. Well, sure, why not?
I've got opinions about Bridget Jones.
Interesting. Okay, because I haven't watched any of those movies all the way through, but I've heard. I had an ex who was really into Bridget Jones, the whole thing, and I feel like I've watched parts of like every major romantic comedy.
Yeah,
but
that's
I've never
probably
sat
true.
through all full one. Yeah, I can't. Maybe like, what was it? How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days? I think that one. I think
that's a good one.
I think
that's like a 2003 deep cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've watched. Yeah, I'm like aging myself also. Probably. the people I date, because I'm like, oh yeah, I also watch Little Black Book, Brittany Murphy. Yeah, but
no, it is at the point where you're like, Brittany Murphy is my rom-com star. It's like, oh, so you not only remember 9/11, you were probably working during it.
I wasn't working. No, I was.
But you remember.
I do remember.
Yeah.
Yes. I was in. This is how we should start every conversation. Just in the first 5 minutes, bring up 9/11.
It's a good. The older I get and the younger I look, I like to know, because sometimes you talk to people about things and their cultural references are different. Like I've had conversations like this with people that I assumed were my peers, and they were like, "Oh, there was that Netflix rom-com," and I'm like, "Which one?" And they're like, "To All the Boys." I'm like, "That is a teen movie. That is a movie with high schoolers in it." And they're like, "Well, at the time I was in high school," and I'm like, "Nope, I give up. I tap out. I don't want to have this conversation anymore."
I don't think we talked about that. How old are you?
I'm 28.
Okay.
So not so old, but I'm getting to the point where people are really like, oh, 30 is right around then. It's like, no, actually it's far away.
You're like on the cusp then of like millennial to Gen Z.
Yeah.
You're like right there.
Yeah, I'm right there. Like I got my first cell phone when I was 17, and I think that was really good for like my brain development, but socially it's really been a handicap.
You just told me that you have so many photos on your cell phone that it literally broke.
It did, yeah, because I do have that like very millennial thing of like, I must document everything, and not well. Like I know kids who are like so very clever and very talented with their phones, and I think we use cell phones as a medium, which is really interesting. I don't. There's no artistic quality to the things on my phone. It's grocery lists and pictures of posters on bus signs, because like I need to take a photo of it so that I remember where the thing is, and then I don't look back through photos. So I have endless photos of like free events in parks that I didn't go to.
Nicely done. That's a millennial move right there. That might even be a boomer move, to be quite honest with you. That's
okay. I don't want to get into that, but the amount of screenshots I have of my own home screen, because I like went to lock my phone and then I took a screenshot and I don't delete them. That's the most boomer thing on my phone, is just endless screenshots of my own screen.
All right, we'll go. We're going on a tangent here, but I want to get us back to romantic comedies here. So, where did you like kind of? Do you remember like your first like fascination with this particular genre? Like, was there like a
absolutely
defining movie of like your, I don't know, childhood or preteen?
See, this is gonna date me. My first rom-com that I remember watching, and that really probably hit me a little too early for me to get it, and on like being more mature and having, I hope, better taste, is not an amazing one, but it is one that I love. It's He's Just Not That Into You. It was this ensemble comedy after Love Actually. So Love Actually comes out, and it's like, wait, we can shove as many A and B list celebrities into a movie as possible with disparate plots and sort of poor resolutions and not big character arcs. But they're hot and they're here. And we had Alan Rickman. So after Love Actually in the 2000s, you get this sort of lull, and there's a lot of ways that you can track that to what's going on with studios, what we think is going on with audiences, and what's going on in women's lives, because romantic comedy is a women's genre.
Mm-hmm.
But all that to say that ensemble comedies were really big, and I was staying at my grandmother's house, and the TV was on, and nobody was watching what I was watching, and He's Just Not Then Do comes on, and I watched the whole thing. So it's Justin Long is in it, Bradley Cooper, Scarlett Johansson. Like, it was a pretty stacked cast, and they're all of these like singles and couples in Baltimore. And the protagonist, Gigi, is this girl who is just trying to figure out like why guys don't call her back. She's like, I go on these first dates and I think they go well, and the guy gives me a kiss afterward. And it's also like very turn of the century in a way that I really related to, because Drew Barrymore's in it. She's great in that. Because they're talking about, it used to be you'd see a guy in real life and you'd give him your one home phone number and he would call it or not call it. But now you have an email and you have IM and you are texting and and he's calling your phone, like your house phone, and you don't know whether he's not calling because he's not interested or because he doesn't know what to call you on. And it's like just the beginning of virtual dating, online dating is like very much this new thing. And that is super interesting, especially now looking back at it. That's very typical. I know lots of couples who met their partners online, but this is, I want to say 2000 to 2004, right when the start of that is happening. And Gigi is the main character. She is asking Justin Long sort of, why don't guys call me back? And they're friends, they meet, he's a bartender. And he said this line that I love and that really probably is responsible for all of my good relationships. He says to Gigi, he's like, listen, if a guy wants to call you, he'll call you. I once called 300 Abbeys in the phone book because a girl wrote her number on my hand and I couldn't tell if it was a 7 or a 1. So I called all of them. And she's like, what happened? He's like, well, her ass looked worse in the daylight. And it's very funny. I like that a lot. But I was 14 or 15 and I see this line and I'm like, yeah, if a guy wants to call you, he'll call you. And that became this like ethos for me. And there are lots of rom-coms, and I think a lot of rom-coms have that sort of impulse to, there's a lesson, there's a story, there's a sort of framework for like, how do we find true love? Because as silly as they can be and as frivolous as they can be and as tropey as they can be, that is a big question. And we're not doing drama movies or many of the movies that like try to deal with that. It's a rom-com. And so you want a happy ending at the end, but you also want people to know why it came so that they can go and like replicate that. That's what we want from a rom-com. Is like, how do you find happily ever after? And is there a map? And are there like signs that I should be looking for? And that just like, as a kid, I was like, oh, this is everything. This is just exactly what I need. And so that was my first rom-com. And it's not my favorite anymore, but it was a really good intro to the genre. And it was very funny. It was very like absurd. And it has all of the tropes that we really think rom-coms are famous for, but it was very good.
Yeah. Well, so you pointed to like some of the positives, like extrapolating some of those lessons that you got out of that, and like, or at least like the good lessons, I should say. But obviously, like there are some that are like bad lessons, and some of like the time. I remember people pointing out to me, like I mentioned Bridget Jones, and like back then people thought like, oh, she's fat.
Oh yeah, Bridget Jones and her normal body, she is maybe a size 4.
Yeah.
Like maybe she is short and fine. She's British and she smokes too much, but she's definitely not fat. Like of all the things we could hold
British
against
is the worst
her,
thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like British was I mean, the guys she dated were British too, and you can tell. But fully, it's like, no, girl, your body is fine. You're absolutely right. There's a lot in rom-coms that's like very. I feel very like personally strongly about this. I'm a little bit type A, and I have straight brown hair. I wanted really badly to have curly blonde hair and be type B. But in romantic comedies, I'm always the first girlfriend, not the happy ending girlfriend. I learned this really early, is that in You've Got Mail, I'm not Meg Ryan, I'm Parker Posey. I'm out here like talking on my BlackBerry and clicking in heels, and just I end up alone at the end of the movie. And I've worked so many Meg Ryan jobs. I was a preschool teacher, I was a bookseller, I've been a baker. Like I'm out here looking for Tom Hanks, but I'm working against type. I really am.
Have you tried just changing everything about you? Have you tried?
I've had multiple perms. I want you to know I was committed because I think straight hair just says uptight in a way that like frizzy, bouncy, lively hair does not. I'm like, I think I'm a lively person. My hair should reflect verve. The perms, they were real bad. They were real
All right, so was there like an
Mhm.
evolution of like how you viewed rom-coms over time then? Like, you know, besides just being something that's entertaining to watch, but
Mhm.
like you are looking now for, drawn more towards a particular type or
Yeah, I think my favorites are really the golden eras of rom com. And I think there were two. There's the early 1950s and 60s. So the first romantic comedy is Frank Capra's It Happened One Night. That's Clark Gable
Mhm.
and Claudette Colbert. And it's very good. It's very funny. And it really is very timeless. And it dealt with what was at the time a very racy thing. A woman and a man are traveling, they're unmarried, they're not even together at the beginning of it, but they are traveling unchaperoned
Mhm.
across the country
It's
together.
interesting that I actually have seen that movie.
Yeah,
I saw it
yeah,
in like a college film class.
yeah, because it's a classic. It is the first. It is what we now think of as the first rom com.
Mhm.
In part because it has sound and there is silent film comedy and there are silent film romances. But that fusion and rom coms are, I think, more prevalent now than straight romance movies. That was not a thing. And so after It Happened One Night, you have this really great decade of what I call divorce comedies.
Mhm.
And divorce comedies, I think, are really funny. It was their way of getting around sex when there are still censors. And so you get a lot of films like Philadelphia Story, My Favorite Wife, The Awful Truth. Cary Grant's in a lot of these, where a couple who got divorced come back together. And that's your way of getting around sort of an
Yeah.
ingenue in a first marriage. It's like they've had sex. We're rooting for them. And there's such a little morality thing in there where it's like, divorce is not legitimate, and if you get divorced you should get back together with your ex, which, like, now that would be the biggest red flag in a movie. Can you imagine seeing a movie where they're like, no, get back with your ex?
Well, they have had. Well, there's like what was it, like that Tyler Perry movie, like I Think I Love My Wife or something like that. Now, okay, now we're getting into now like the different like little
Yeah,
genres. It's like, do you
yeah.
have opinions on like those movies where it's like, I don't know, black? Well, I mean, obviously there's that race aspect of it
Mhm.
too, but like, the like, oh, they just falling out of passion or love
Mhm.
with each other, and then they rediscover it at the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's what's that song where they're both like pina coladas, the pina colada song, and it's like,
Hmm.
oh, actually, maybe you should just go home to your wife.
Yeah.
And that's totally a thing, and that in these like first rom-coms, it's a thing, but it's been a really prevalent. There was just one with George Clooney and Julia Roberts where they're a divorced couple and they go to like their daughter's wedding, her destination wedding, and they get thrown together over and over. We love that. We love the idea
Hmm.
that like the one that got away will come back to us with
Yeah.
like their edges softened and sort of better than they were before, and everyone like falls back in love. And I think that like speaks so much to like our own impulses because everyone has that favorite ex. Like
Mhm.
I have a favorite ex, absolutely. And those rom coms are for that part of you. It's not like I don't want to keep looking for something new. I want to go back through my Rolodex of like, could that work again? We haven't grown. We are not better now, but we could try it. And so there are a lot of, even now that's a very abiding trope, and I think that's super interesting.
Hmm. Um, so we talked about like
Mm-hmm.
the history of the
Mm-hmm.
rom coms, and it made me start to think a little bit about like even uh, you know like literature.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, like your dissertation touched on like literature at all, but I
Mm-hmm.
remember reading like Shakespeare's comedies
Mm-hmm.
are in a way also rom coms.
Oh yeah, very much. I would say in terms of the written romantic comedy, and even if we think about plays as precursors to film, Shakespeare does do the first rom com, The Taming of the Shrew,
Hmm.
As You Like It, even Twelfth Night, and he plays with things that he's not the only person of his like among his contemporaries. He's not the only one doing it, but he is the most long lasting, the one that we still read, where he plays with things like gender swapping, and we see that because we have films now that are modern Shakespeare adaptations, like She's the Man,
Hmm.
with Amanda Bynes. That's Twelfth Night, and it's really funny. The Taming of the Shrew is 10 Things I Hate About You. There was this really like 90s Shakespeare binge where all of a sudden we were like, what if Shakespeare happened to like Valley
Just
teens?
put Leonardo DiCaprio in
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, no, that absolutely. We were like, we need more Shakespeare, but they need to use slang a little bit, and there should be guns.
Well, it makes me think of like,
Mm.
these are not necessarily the same ideas have been recycled or repurposed, and these themes have been existing for, what was that, like 500 years now,
Yeah.
something like that. So it's like the same stuff, the same
Mm.
notes hit across generations. So it's not
Mhm.
like, these are new ideas. These are
Mhm.
just, new interpretations, I
Mhm.
guess. Um, All right, so like, what would say if you had? I'll ask this question. I hate like saying like favorites, but
Mm-hmm.
and especially when it's such a broad category when we start to extrapolate past outside of just
Mm-hmm.
like what is mainstream. All right, let's start there. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
like, do you have like three mainstream rom coms that you think like everybody should watch?
Very much, yeah. I would say It Happened One Night really holds up, is very funny, and it gets taught in film classes. It's very much a classic for a reason. I would say When Harry Met Sally
Hmm.
is fantastic. It's very dialogue-y. Nora Ephron and Rob Reiner have this really lucrative partnership in the 90s, and that is like the second golden age of romantic comedy. And I think it does well everything a rom com can do well, which is in a rom com that goes really, really well. You have a man and a woman, and they start in different places, and they both soften, they both bend, and they meet in the middle in a way that feels really organic. And then you have like the Katherine Heigl rom coms of the 2000s, and they're terrible. And they are all about this gorgeous woman who has to lower herself to Seth Rogen's level so they can. It's no longer like two people meeting in the middle, but you have a very type A woman. I'm sensitive about those women. I think they deserve better than Seth Rogen. But you do,
Well, there
and
was
you
the
have that
ugly
sort of
truth.
leveling out.
I did see the ugly truth.
Yeah, fully. Or you get God, she was in a lot of really bad ones where very much it is sort of like type A woman meets like man who's immature for some reason. Sometimes he's immature because he has hidden depths, like
Yeah,
maybe he has a divorce he didn't get over, maybe his parents were divorced and he just doesn't believe in love now.
just hitting all Judd Apatow's movies.
All of them. All of them. There are guys that you're like, wow, your parents got divorced at a really critical moment and you never got over it. Noah Baumbach is one. All of his movies are divorce movies. Judd Apatow is another.
Mm.
Like, okay, I see you. I feel like they have therapy for that, or you could just make a whole movie with all of your friends.
All right. So what about like non like mainstream, like maybe like some uh three movies that like are the rom com genre that maybe not a lot of people know about.
I think there are a lot of indie movies, and that's sort of the 70s. You get these indie rom coms. The Graduate is classified as a rom com, and I think that it is, but the comedy I think comes very much in a more Greek sense in that like comedy is a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
And there's romance and there's a lot of pathos and there's this really good and very timely sense of what it meant to be a sort of post-war generation who had gone to college and gotten all these things and was feeling very adultified. And so Dustin Hoffman has this affair with an older woman, and Mrs. Robinson is the most interesting part of that movie. It's very, very good, but it's not one that if you were making a list of the 10 greatest rom-coms, The Graduate's not going to be on there because it's not slapsticky. There's no
Yeah.
like funny dialogue. It's a little bit sad and morbid and odd. I think 500 Days of Summer is another one that very similarly, like, it's an indie rom-com. I think people get very divided about it, but it is a romantic comedy, and in the sense that it's a comedy, it does have a happy ending. They don't, spoiler alert, this movie came out in like 2011, spoiler alert, they don't end up together. But there is a happy ending, and I think that is sort of, that does it. It encapsulates this genre of comedy. And then I would probably say something smaller indie with Rachel McAdams. It's About Time is very good. It's got, that redheaded boy. His dad was in Harry Potter. This is terrible, but it's got Rachel McAdams.
Rupert Grint.
No, he played his older brother though. He plays Bill Weasley, like the older Weasley brother.
Oof, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
that
he's not
actor's
one of the
name.
popular Weasleys. We don't need to know his name. But the older Weasley falls in love with Rachel McAdams, and it's funny, and there's this like time travel element, but it's very much not a fantasy. It's not at all interested in how the time travel happens or what you can do with it. It's like, nope, he just gets to spend 100 days with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really cute and sweet, but it's not, I would say it's probably also not on many lists of like 10 best rom-coms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. It's yeah, because I think I've either seen parts of or I've actually heard some of these, and so like, do you also watch any like international films that have like that fit the genre of rom com?
Oh yeah, yes. I think that's a very interesting thing. I like international film generally, and I actually think in the past 8 years there has been more independent and sort of new directors and more interesting things happening within international film than I think happen within mainstream American film. And that's not to say that we don't have awesome movies. There still are. But I would say The Worst Person in the World falls into sort of romantic comedy in the way that 500 Days of Summer does. It was very good. It came out 2022. It was really absurd and funny and sad. It's definitely a dramatic film, but it is a comedy. And I like that very much. Blue is the Warmest Color is a queer film, and it's an international film. And I think there are a lot of like British romantic comedies. And I feel like British people aren't real internationals. They're colonizers. They're not internationals. There's a difference. There's a difference. Nobody's ever like, I saw this great international film. It was British.
What did the British do to you?
It's not what they've done to me. It's what they've done to us all. Listen, I'm a collectivist. I am hurt on behalf of all people. On behalf of all people, we have a terrible financial system and no spice in our foods, and that's them. That all is on them.
Hey, speak for yourself. I got some spice in my food.
You got some spice in your food. I'm compensating, but still, like, I have to go where I live. I go to this Indian grocer to get my spice because the international aisle of my grocery store is like, we've got paprika. I'm like, does nothing for me. And I think that's a British thing.
Get some spices while you're in Chicago. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening in Pittsburgh, but
I've got a check bag. I've got some room.
Yeah. All right. So now here's an interesting question. I'm interested in like what's a almost universally loved rom-com that you cannot stand?
I would say some of the more recent ones because they're very sleek. I think something happened between the 80s and sort of the death of rom-com in the early 2000s, and then there's been this revitalization, and like To All the Boys I've Loved Before is a very good example of this. It is very magazine editorial. Like the kids are really handsome. They go to a very wealthy high school, and all of a sudden like this set dressing of romantic comedy, which is, yeah, I'm thinking of anything that Sandra Bullock is in, it's very working class. Like While You Were Sleeping, which is set in Chicago, is excellent. She lives in this tiny apartment. Like she's got a cat, the heat doesn't work. It's very relatable and it feels lived in. And I think Hallmark movies do the same thing where they get very sleek and they get very like HGTV home. And it feels like you filmed Love It or List It. And then you move in your rom-com actors into the like List It house. And it's just very beigey. So To All the Boys I've Loved Before, that felt really beigey to me. And this last one with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell. And the name I'm blanking on, but it came out at Thanksgiving. It came out in the past year. And it was very beautiful. People liked it. Audiences liked it a lot. But it's so sleek, it almost feels like reality TV. Like they go on this Kardashian-esque Australian trip. And everyone is so conventionally attractive. And they have jobs like, I don't know, he's probably an investment broker or something douchey. Like, it is. It's a douchebag job.
Yeah.
And the whole rom-com feels very Instagrammable. Oh, that is another thing. Like, it's very of anything that feels hyper current, like where people are like, oh, we're going to have Instagram in our romantic. That's the quickest way for me to feel like something's very dated.
Yeah.
Because like the telephone has been around for long enough that any rom-com with a landline in it doesn't feel particularly dated. And even cell phones now I think are pretty ubiquitous and they've been around for long enough that we're not like, oh God, this was made in 2014. You can tell because that's an iPhone 1. But things like social media, if that's a plot point in a rom-com, I just can't stand it. I think it's very trite and it's just such a quick way. Yeah, it feels like we're going to look at it in 3 years in the same way that we look at certain hair trends or like bringing back low-rise jeans. Which I don't know why we did that. But it's going to feel like that. It's like the low-rise jeans of rom-com.
So you're not a fan of You've Got Mail?
I love You've Got Mail. Although I love You've Got Mail because I love Meg Ryan.
Yeah.
I think falling in love with the capitalist who bankrupts your small family-owned business is terrible. What a terrible... He comes in with his big, like, suit and his, like, asshole behavior. And fully, Dave Chappelle was in that, and he's great in that.
I didn't even know that. Wow. Yeah,
he plays Tom Hanks' best friend, which everything about that movie, that's what's unbelievable. Tom Hanks is this venture capitalist with a cool black friend. Like, miss me with that. I don't believe it. It shouldn't have happened. And then he closes down her dead mother's bookstore and brings her flowers. And he's like, listen, I love you. Like, fuck right off with that. No. Men should be poor but have hearts of gold. They should not be rich and assholes.
That is hilarious. Just Tom Hanks hanging out with Dave Chappelle. Just like.
Do you believe that? If you saw them out, it would be like one of those weird animal friendships. Like a rabbit and like a puma. And you're like, oh, that's cute and strange.
As the characters, it's just like, yeah, I just threw a family out on the street. You want to go hoop later? Like, sure, Tom. That sounds great.
It is. They have like such a dude friendship. There's this scene where they're on treadmills, walking next to each other, talking about bitches. And I'm like, I don't believe this. I don't believe that a man hangs out this consistently with one of his man friends. Men are not planners. Like, are you kidding? Every woman in a rom-com who's constantly surrounded by her 3 closest girlfriends, I'm like, yes, I believe you. You see each other twice a week and you call each other every day. But when a guy's out perpetually with his male friends, I'm like, which of you planned this? You don't seem together enough to plan things. Like, I don't believe that this happened.
Yeah, that's fair, because right now my girlfriend is in Italy on like a girls trip, and
that makes sense.
They spent like a year planning this whole thing, and like there are spreadsheets and PowerPoints and all this, and I would hang out with like I don't even know if I have a best friend at this point. I just like there's just guys I see around like, hey, what's up, man?
There are so many articles. You know how people talk about like there's an epidemic of loneliness? There are so many articles about how men don't have friends anymore. I haven't seen a single article like that about women. It is. It's like, if you have a boyfriend, you've got girlfriends who like remind you that you could do better. If you don't have a boyfriend, you definitely have girlfriends who are out there trying to get you a boyfriend. Like, you're out all the time with your friends. I know guys who like, they go on guys trips and they'll all bring the beer. Like, they'll bring tents, sleeping bags, and they all assume they're on drinks duty. And then no one has brought firewood or like fucking hot dogs.
Live off the land. What are you talking about?
It is. It's very like, okay.
We'll fish.
That's the most like unrealistic thing about any rom-com is if a guy has to like throw a party or make it to the airport on time or coordinate with 5 of his, like any rom-com where the guy is in like a bachelor party and they're all in the wedding party, I'm like, yes, you're gonna kill somebody. When they kill like a stripper, I'm always like, that makes sense. That feels like how that was gonna go for you. Girls never do that. I've never seen like a girl power movie where they kill a hooker. Not ever.
Hey, make the first one. That would be.
It's gonna be a documentary. When I finally get married, I'm gonna bring like a live doc crew.
Okay, the closest thing I could think of is Jawbreaker. That's a real dated reference, but that was a movie from the 90s where they like kidnapped some. It's like a teen movie where they like kidnap their best friend or something, and like they put a jawbreaker, like one of those big ones in her mouth, and like tie her up and put her in the trunk of a car, and then they like open up like surprise, and she actually like choked on the jawbreaker and died. Of course she would. And then the whole movie was about them like trying to hide it, and the one girl is like, "No, we need to tell people." They're like, "We gotta kill this bitch." Like,
that's a very Heather's thing. Is just like we've accidentally done something, and there's always you can tell. It's very group project-y. Like, there's the one person who's like, I already made our PowerPoint. I've got the spreadsheets. We're going to take a blood pact. No one snitches. And there's the person who, like, shows up late for the group project and is like, I actually don't know that I want to do this at all. And it's like, we killed her. We're in it now. We are in it. Yeah.
And what persona would you have taken on?
I probably would have opted out of a group project because I work better alone. But if we've killed someone, I'm definitely the one like scrubbing my girlfriend's phones. I'm like, no, don't call your boyfriend. He can't help you. That man has loose lips. Like, no, we don't call anyone. We handle this here. You take the ankles. I'll take the head. You grab a shovel. We got to do this all in cash. This makes it sound like I've thought about this a lot, actually. The more I go into this,
I was
like,
more so thinking you'd be the one who's like, guys, Megan's going to break. We got to get rid of Megan. Like, we got to, I can feel it. She's going to break.
No, I don't think the solution is to kill more people. I think the solution is to pretend that Megan has a troubled drug history. That's what you do. You call her mom and you go, hey, I'm worried. I know that like since her breakup, she's not been the same, but she's saying crazy stuff about killing Abby. And we wanted to call you. So you like discredit her. You make it so that like she's still around. Because if all your girlfriends start dropping dead, someone's going to point at you. But if one of your girlfriends dies, another one breaks, but you're like, she's having a psychotic
That is
episode.
so smart and so evil all at the same time. And
yeah, I'm realizing you're recording this. It's not ideal to have said this on tape. Not. I should have got that
because
closer
my
to
guy
the
brain
chest.
is like, yeah, we kill the leak, we get rid of the leak, and you're like, no, we
because then
assassinate her character, and then
yeah, because plenty of your friends probably are okay with killing one person, or are frankly what it is are okay with once one person's died, not going to jail for life because like nobody wants to be there. But once you're like, we got to kill everybody up to a point, you either have to decide that you're the last one standing, because the only way to have no witnesses is to have none, or you figure it out and you're like, I know that none of us are going to break. And that is, you make an example of the first girl to crack and you're like, listen, it helps if she has rich parents because they're just going to like put her in a rehab somewhere for years. They're going to be like, no, she's taking a rest.
If I ever start a criminal empire, I'm like, you're my capo, okay? You're like my fucking concierge. That's the thing. That's where I'm looking
It is.
for.
In like Ocean's 11, I don't think I'd be any of the guys in the casino. I'd very much be the guy in the van with like headphones on. I think I have headphones guy energy. Like I'm not George Clooney, but I'm not useless.
Yeah, no, you're definitely making things work behind the scenes. I like
yeah.
Okay, so back to the romantic comedies. I was thinking about this when we were talking, and you ever notice like some movies, like if you watch it on the surface, you're like, oh, this is an action movie, and you're like, no, this is a romantic comedy. Like,
oh yeah,
they hid this underneath there.
I feel that way really, really strongly about Bruce Willis in
Die Hard?
Yes, in Die Hard. Die Hard is a rom-com. It is 90 minutes of a man apologizing to his wife. He kills terrorists to apologize to his wife. Fully, he gets out there, and it is. I think it follows a rom-com structure. Comedy in the classical sense, there is a happy ending.
Yep.
Romance, it's there. She's his ex-wife, and I think it falls into a long line of divorce comedies where he goes out to see his ex-wife. They don't work for whatever reason, and then there is something that reframes why they don't work, and it makes it either seem unimportant or one of them bends. And so Bruce Willis, at the time, he's like, no, I'm not moving my career for your career, which, what a beta cuck move, but whatever. I'm sorry, not to be brutal. He's so hot in that movie, but really, it's like, your wife is doing awesome stuff. Your kids are out there. Like, why would you not go where your wife and kids go? And also, notably, she's doing the like working girl thing and she takes the kids. Like he doesn't have to keep his career and the kids, but she's out there doing awesome shit in her high-rise terror building while the kids are at home with the nanny. But he does. He gets in, he's at the office party, and he hasn't made up his mind. In that early like cab ride, he doesn't know whether he's staying with her or staying with a friend, and he wants to. He clearly wants to stay with Holly McClane, and he's just not sure how open she is to that. And then when she gets, abducted with everybody else and she's being held hostage, all of his skills come into play. And he's like, this is what I do. I love my wife. I want to protect my wife. Like, these motherfuckers have messed up somewhere. It is 90 minutes of a man apologizing to his wife for being hard-headed. It's the most romantic comedy. It's the most.
Yeah. I get to rewatch Die Hard with new eyes now.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of this about, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, True Lies. It's with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis. But the movie is essentially like, it is that movie of like, oh, they're like dispassionate about, he's a spy and she doesn't know, and they're like dispassionate about their relationship. And so like he suspects her of cheating on him. So he like sets up this thing of like trying to recruit her as like a double agent or something. And it's this weird, like, it's just weird dynamic, but it works where like they get the happy ending at the end. She ends up like saving him and like vice versa, and they save the daughter and so on and so forth. And it's really it's such a dumb movie, but it's also really fucking fun.
Only a man would turn his wife into a spy before just asking, hey, do you feel like we're not as close as we used to be? Like that seems like it could have been one conversation where you sit down and you're like, hey baby, I feel like we're off. Instead, you get a whole movie, and I'm sure the movie's better for it. He's like, what is the most roundabout way to see if my wife still loves me? Like, just checking.
Put her in just abject danger at every single chance
absolutely.
I get.
Yeah, that's how you know. I had, one of the worst dates I ever went on. The guy told me offhand, he's like, they say that adrenaline brings people closer, so I like to do dates where there's like a little bit of adrenaline. And I'm thinking, like, that sounds like it works if it's skydiving, but that's a trauma bond. What he's describing is a trauma bond. And guys are like, yeah, of course James Bond falls in love with whoever's with him. And it's like, no, she is trauma bonded to that man because they've been getting shot at for like the entire movie. The entire movie. She either has like Stockholm syndrome or she's majorly trauma bonded and now she doesn't know how to have a normal relationship. Like that's why those movies work.
The first time I heard about that was from the movie Speed.
Yeah. I don't know whether they're in love or whether they're just like shaken.
Yeah.
Because it is. There's totally the level of we didn't die, we should have sex. That's not love. You don't want to like tell your kids 10 years from now, how did you and mom meet? Well, it was this really high pressure situation and I was the first man there.
If the bus slowed down below 50
we
miles
would
per
die.
hour, and then we've lived our lives like that every single day ever since.
Yeah, honestly, I wonder if that relationship, if there's never that initial high, because you have that first day on the bus where you're like, this man is a hero, and then the rest of the time he's like forgetting to take the trash out, and you're like, this fucker, put me back on the bus.
Do you believe in the meet cute?
I do, yeah. I think both in the real world, I think it's a much better way to date than dating on apps. I think apps gamify dating in a way, like we all know about this. There are articles about this. I'm not going to say anything new or clever about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the meet cute is a good way to tell if there's that like very ephemeral spark, like, oh, is there enough here for this to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
And again, I worked as a baker and a preschool teacher and a bookseller. I lived in all of the places that you could meet someone cutely. Like, I was there. I was there for all of it. And it worked, especially at the bookstore. Guys fucking love to go in and they're like, bitch can read. And then they're all of a sudden like, so what's your favorite book? And what are you doing after this? And it's like, no, I don't have time. But it's true. It happens. I think really that's what it is. We all need to leave like our high-powered career jobs because like, you don't want to meet somebody in your office. They're all 40. What you want is to like go out, like baristas, I bet they have really cute meet cutes. Bartenders, I think is great. Bookseller. Comedian, I think can go either way because unfortunately you meet a lot of other comedians. Yeah. But you're out, you're there, you're like in person with people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I crowd worked her and, you know, asked her where she's from.
Okay, no, that is the most male comedian thing possible. I saw a hot girl. I picked on her from stage while I had all of the power. And then afterward, I was like, you see that? You like it? You want a drink? I have seen guys do this. I have seen guys be like, no, yeah, I do this a lot. I'm a comedian. And it's like, sir, I say this with all respect as an open micer. You're an open micer. Yeah. And that's okay. But like, we're not at like the Improv every night. Like, you're fine.
Have you ever met a guy like after a show?
No.
Every woman I've asked about, they're like, no. Oh, an audience member? What are you, fucking stupid?
Just because I go on stage and I'm like, this is my period and this is my relationship with my mom and this is my sex life. It's like giving someone all of the answers before a date. And he's like, so I feel like we got a lot of it out of the way. And it's like, nope, I don't. I feel like you got a cheat code. Like, you don't even know what my favorite color is.
Oh, God. That's hilarious. Okay. I had one last question I did want to ask about is, so I know obviously the rom-com genre primarily targets women. So are there like movies you have in mind where you're like, men, this, if I was trying to sell men on a rom-com, this is the movie or movies I would like tell them to watch?
Yeah, actually, I might be primed to think of this because I'm in Chicago right now, but The Breakup with Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn, I think is very good. It, I would say, is a rom-com. And it's set at the end of a relationship where two people, they own a home together, they're breaking up, and they decide to play chick, and they're like, I'm not moving, this is my house. And they both feel that way, so they sort of escalate the stakes. And it's very, very funny. I think Vince Vaughn is a great, like, physical and underrated comedic actor. Their chemistry is very good. And it's not super sappy. It's a little bit brutal at one point to like show her that he's fine. He invites all his guys over and I think some strippers for like a poker night. And it's like, that's a very guy thing. You're like, I'm showing my ex that I'm fine. Like, she's in her bedroom crying and he's like, no, I'm good. I'm living my best life. I'm getting my revenge body in real time. And it's very funny. I think it's something that a lot of guys would like. Although honestly, I think there are a lot, like Howard Deutsch's Some Kind of Wonderful, I think is really good. I think When Harry Met Sally can be very funny. I think Tom Hanks is great. Actually, my favorite Tom Hanks rom-com isn't You've Got Mail. It's Sleepless in Seattle. I think he's great in Sleepless in Seattle. And I think he's a guy's guy. He's got a son. He's great. He's very funny. And there is a little bit of like just mysticism and this very much this idea that like you see the person and it's like love at first sight, and I liked that. But I think it's very much when I hang out with my guy friends and I'm like, I've got the remote, it's my turn. We watched a Marvel movie last week. We're watching a rom-com. Those are the ones that like I would put on for a guy, and I think they really like.
I like. Yeah. Personally, I like the ones that are almost like anti-rom-coms, like how they like get you in. There's this one movie that I watched that it sticks out to me. You probably don't like it because it's British, or at least the actors are. But it's, I Give It a Year.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like, there's a big twist at the end, which I won't give away. But like, I really enjoy how that movie progressed and how it like kind of had like the tropes, but like trying to spin them around and like try to subvert expectations. So that was one that I was like, oh, I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny as hell.
I think if you like that, you should try Celeste and Jesse Forever. It's Rashida Jones and Andy Samberg, and it's very much a similar like anti-rom-com. It's absurdly funny. Like it's really, really darkly funny. But I think that it's a great sort of anti-rom-com, and it does a really good job of like pulling apart different tropes and giving you an ending that like is a great ending for a movie, but very much not what you expect and not what you'd, I think, hope if you were in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's it. I think that's it for him. Like all my questions. Any other like little tidbits, things you want to talk about regarding rom-coms or?
I think really this is my one feedback for whoever writes rom-coms, the gods of romance. I'm sick of girls who eat a burger and this somehow telegraphs that they're not like other women because they hate vegetables. That I'm over. I can't eat a burger. I often get a salad. I don't think that means that I shouldn't find true love. And I just, if anyone is listening, if anybody watches this, I'm over burger girls. I don't want them. They come out in a jersey. They look so cool and
drank
hot.
A whole beer in like one go.
Yeah. Oh my God. Girls that like shotgun. It's very Olivia Wilde. Like they're very cool girls. Listen, there are girls that are not so cool that, again, still want to find love. And I think on behalf of all of us, we could dial it back a notch. I would like some like less cool girls. I'd like, and not even like quirky girls. Also, I can't do any crafts. I can't fucking live up to that. I want like a really average girl. I want a girl who's like, I graduated, mostly with B's, but I graduated. I sometimes eat salad. I rarely cook. I don't know how to do my laundry. Like that. That's what I want. I think that girl, I could really relate to her. I want that. So to anyone who is listening and also makes movies, enough of Burger Girl. Enough of Burger Girl.
No more Burger Girl.
Yeah.
Regular women. We want regular women.
Yeah, fully that. I want someone who looks at Bridget Jones and is like, she's normal fucking looking.
Give us a communications major.
That is it. It's psychology majors and communications. I want a communications major who falls in love with the business major that's in her like sister frat, because that's really how it is. She's a sorority girl. He's a frat brother. I don't know that they're in love, but they look like they could be related.
HR rep, a recruiter. Somebody like
an adult job. I want someone with some boring ass. They can't all be perfect. Like all of these fucking rom-com women have like bluebirds that wake them up in the morning. I don't wake up that way. I want a girl who looks like she has morning breath.
All right.
Yeah. There we go.
Well, Nadiya, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you, or if you have any projects coming up that you want to plug?
I am on Instagram pretty infrequently. I will probably get to OnlyFans if it gets bad enough. Like, I'm not above it. But people can find me on Instagram, and they can find me in Pittsburgh for the rest of the summer. That's where I am, and then I'll be on the East Coast for a little bit. But just around. I'm around.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.